Good morning. Today is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. I want to share a problem I have. It's a problem I deal with on a regular basis. Many people deal with this problem. It's a situation where there is no right or wrong. It's just a question of finding the right balance between two sides. And I struggle with this constantly. And I don't think I do a very good job of navigating it effectively. And it revolves around a problem in this week's Torah portion, the double parsha of Netzavim-VaYeilech. In our parsha, we find that Moshe, at the end of his life, finally turns over the leadership of the Jewish people to his successor, to Yehoshua, to Joshua. And in this passage, both Moshe and God give a bracha, a blessing to Yehoshua, which is really a form of advice that they are giving him about leadership. Now, please listen carefully to the two pieces of advice, to the two blessings, because they sound almost the same, but there is one critical difference. Vayikra Moshe liYehoshua v'yomrei lo le'enei kol Yisrael. Moshe called to Yehoshua, and he said to him in front of the entire Jewish people, Chazak v'amatz, be strong and of good courage, Yehoshua. Ki ata tavo es ha'am hazeh, because you will come with the people into this land. Ela aretz asher nishba Hashem lavosam, to the land that God promised to our forefathers. A few psukim later, God says to Yehoshua, Vayitzaves Yehoshua ben Nun vayomer, God commanded Yehoshua the son of Nun and said, Chazak v'amatz, be strong and good courage, same words. Ki ata tavi es b'nei Yisrael, because you will bring the Jewish people El ha'aretz asher nishbati lehem, to the land that I have promised them. Now, Moshe says, Ki ata tavo, you will come with the people into the land. God says, Tavi es b'nei Yisrael, you will bring the people into the land. And the words sound almost the same. But the difference between the two is vast and critical. Rashi explains as follows. Moshe said to Yehoshua, make sure, as you are leading the Jewish people, that the people are with you. Always act with consensus in accordance with their opinion and their advice. So, tavo, you're going to come with the people in a consensus fashion. That's how you should lead. But God says to Yehoshua, Tavi, bring them into the land that I have promised them. Bring them even against their will. It all depends on you. There can only be one leader. In any one time, only one leader, not two. So Rabbi Jonathan Sacks explains that here we find two extreme models of leadership. Tavo, consensus, to lead with consensus, and tavi, to command. Moshe advised Yehoshua to take the policy of consultation and conciliation. And what Moshe was saying to Yehoshua was, listen, you don't need to always follow what the people say. You're the leader, but you do need to work with them. You do need to realize that you are the head of a team. And they, the people, need to feel that they are part of the decision-making process. They will not expect you to always agree with them. Often they will not agree with each other, but they do need to be consulted. And if the people sense, Moshe says to Yehoshua, that you're not interested in their opinion, If the impression that the people have of you is that you are determined to do things your way, regardless of what anyone else says because you know better, they will attempt to sabotage you. They will try to do you harm. They may not succeed in doing you harm. You may survive, but you will be injured. You will limp. Your standing among the people will be diminished. And Moshe is saying to Yoshua, I speak from experience. Remember the rebellion of Korach against me. And it was not just Korach. It was Korach. It was the people of Ruvain. It was other leaders from various tribes. And even though that rebellion was cut short in the most dramatic way possible, and I, Moshe, was proven to be correct and they were wrong, the truth is, and we discussed this before, we were all diminished. I was also diminished through that rebellion, and nothing was quite the same ever after. So you have to make sure that the people are with you. And if they are, you will succeed. God, according to this understanding, takes the opposite approach. God says to Yoshua, the time has come to leave the wilderness, to cross the Jordan, to conquer the land, to build the kind of society that I, God, have laid out for you in the Torah, which is a blueprint for the society that I want you to create in Israel. And God says to Yoshua, don't look for consensus. You will never find it. You, the leader, Yoshua, must show people the way. You have to lead from the front. You have to be clear. You have to be consistent. You have to be strong. The last person that led with consensus and followed what the people wanted was Aharon, almost 40 years earlier, and he built the golden calf, which almost put an end to the Jewish people completely. Consensus, it could be in business, it could be in politics. That's not leadership. It's an abdication of leadership. God says, I chose you to be Moshe's successor because I believe in you. And therefore you need to believe in yourself. Tell the people what they must do and tell them why. Be respectful of the people, yes. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is yours. Leaders lead. They do not follow. People want their leaders to be decisive. And if everyone is empowered, there is no music, only noise, no achievement, only an endless committee meeting at which everyone speaks and no one listens. How many of us have experienced that exact situation? Okay, so those were and remain for today two great options of extremes of leadership. And I struggle with it. When should I be decisive and when should I consult and work with consensus? And in each case, I spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to think it through which aspect I should be using or which combination of aspects I should be using. And I don't think I always get it right. But notice something very, very strange. The one urging consensus is Moshe. But look back over the entire Torah. Moshe never acted with consensus. Moshe had to almost drag the people out of Egypt, across the desert. Moshe broke the 2 tablets of stone on his own. Sometimes Moshe acted even before God told him what to do. Yes, it's true there were 70 elders. It's true there were the princes of the tribes. It's true that Moshe set up a structure of judges over different levels. Yes, they helped him. but they did not advise him. We don't find any instance in the Torah where Moshe sought their advice. So why is it all of a sudden now, when he's advising Yehoshua, that he becomes a lead by consensus leader? That's one problem. The second problem is the bracha, the advice given by God to Yehoshua, to lead from the front, to command. But wait a second. Let's remember God's ultimate and perhaps greatest creation back in the beginning of Bereshit, and we discussed this at the time, the creation of human beings, mankind, where God says, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu, let us make man in our image. Who's the us? Who's the our? Our sages explain, we discussed this, let us make man means that God consulted with the angels. Now, this is despite the fact that using the plural, us, was dangerous in the text of the Torah, because it could be read as compromising the pure monotheism of Judaism. Is there one God, or is there, God forbid, more than one God? Us. Who's the plural? Nonetheless, and we've discussed this before, the principle of consultation as an aspect of humility and as an aspect of leadership is so important that the Torah takes the risk of being open to misinterpretation in order to teach us God consults. God does not act tyrannically toward his creatures. Now, even though, of course, it is true that the angels did not assist God in creating man, still, the pasuk does not hesitate to teach us the proper conduct and the trait of humility that a great person should consult with and receive permission from even a less greater person. The very act of God giving human beings freedom of choice means that God never forces us against our will. God tells us what God wants us to do, but we are free to follow or not to follow. As President Eisenhower once said, hitting people over the head is not leadership. It's assault. So why was God here, as it were, speaking out of character of the way he himself created? So here is Rabbi Sacks' conclusion. Both God and Moshe wanted Yehoshua to know that true leadership cannot be a one-sided aspect. Whether it is consensus or command, you need both at different times and in different ratios. And therefore, each one of them, God and Moshe, said to Yehoshua what they were least expected to say based on their own record. Moshe, who everyone associated with strong, decisive leadership, basically, in effect, told Yehoshua, learn from me what not to do. Don't forget to strive for consensus, because your task is not the same as my task. I had to take the people out of slavery. I had to act with commanding. But you have to lead them into a land of freedom. And freedom means taking people seriously. And the leadership of a free people involves listening and respecting and striving for consensus wherever possible. So your leadership, Yehoshua, has got to be different than mine was. God, who had created human beings with freedom and never imposed himself on people against their will, God said to Yehoshua, I am God. You're not God. I have to respect people's freedom. I have to let them go the way they're determined to go, even if it's wrong, even if it's destructive, self-destructive. But you, Yehoshua, you are a human being among human beings. And it's your task to show them the way that leads to justice and compassion and spirituality. But if the people do not agree with you, if you have to teach them, you have to teach them. You have to persuade them. Okay, but ultimately, you have to lead them. Because if everyone does what is right in his or her own eyes, that's not freedom. That's chaos. In other words, leadership is not simple. It's complex because it involves people, and people are complex. You have to listen, but you have to lead. You have to strive for consensus, but ultimately, if there is none, you must take the risk of deciding. It's not the job of leaders to give people what they want. A lot of people, especially leaders, make this mistake. It is not the job of leaders to give people what they want. It is the job of leaders to teach people what they ought to want. But at the same time, leaders must involve people in the decision-making process. And this applies to every aspect of leadership. It applies to rabbis. It applies to lay leaders. It applies to leaders in business. And most certainly, it applies to leaders of families, to parents. Leaders must be teachers, but must also be learners. Leaders must push people, but never too far, never too fast, or they will fail. Leaders must be capable of more than one style of leadership and to know when to use which. And that is rare. I find that is rare because most people trend one way or the other and have difficulty modulating their approach to the situation, often with disastrous results. But Rabbi Jonathan Sacks concludes with these words, and I think this is a perfect description of his accomplishments. There is no better way to flood life with meaning than to have lifted others and helped them to a greatness they never knew they had. To have, together with others, righted some of the wrongs of this injured earth and its creatures. To have acted rather than waiting for others to act, and to have brought others with you. For the greatest leader on earth or in heaven cannot lead alone. So we have two models, and we always search for the correct balance between them. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.